This video is sponsored by Netlify, which is a fantastic service that I use all the time to deploy websites and apps in literally seconds. They offer a ton of features, even with the free plan, including continuous deployment, HTTPS, and add-ons like contact form submission and serverless functions. You can host regular websites, front-end apps using technologies like React, Gatsby, Vue JS, and more. So if you're looking for a simple and modern way to deploy your website, check out netlify.com or click the link in the description below. Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome to my Vue JS Crash Course, and this is actually going to be an updated version of the Crash Course I did about 2 years ago. And if you watch my latest 2019 React Crash Course, this is going to be very similar. Of course, we'll be using Vue, but we're going to actually build the same application. So what is Vue JS? It's a progressive and performant JavaScript framework that's used for building user interfaces and front-end applications. And it's right up there with React and Angular. In fact, in 2018, Vue gained a ton of traction and a lot of respect within the JavaScript community, and we'll talk a little bit about why. So Vue makes creating user interfaces and front-end applications much easier. Of course, you can build just about anything with vanilla JavaScript, but the bigger the application is, the more complex it is. It gets a lot harder and it gets really unorganized. Using something like Vue.js keeps your application in order and gets you thinking of, the different aspects of your user interface as individual components, and it's just much more organized. Vue.js, in my opinion, it has less of a learning curve than something like React or Angular. It seems to use the most common sense. I'm not saying it's the best. I don't say any framework is the best, but it seems to be the easiest to learn and I think has the shortest list of prerequisites. It's also extremely fast and lightweight. Like React, it's a single-page application framework, meaning one page is loaded in the browser, and then everything is done through a virtual DOM. And only certain parts of the page will be updated when they need to be. Vue actually has its own router. We'll be looking at that as well. So you can seem to have multiple pages in your application. Again, Vue is growing in the industry pretty rapidly. So these are some reasons that you might want to learn and use Vue.js. All right, so what should you know before learning Vue? As with any framework, you need to know the fundamentals of JavaScript, especially objects and functions. That's really what Vue is made of. The other stuff below all has to do with the newer ES6 features like the module syntax, high-order array methods, arrow functions, fetch API promises. This is stuff that you should probably learn before jumping into any framework. But like I said, I think Vue is the easiest one to learn, so you might be okay just knowing the fundamentals and then learning Vue. All right, so if you took my React Crash Course on YouTube, this image is going to look really familiar because just like with React, Vue also uses components or UI components. Traditionally, you may have been taught about separation of concerns where you have your markup, meaning your HTML, your JavaScript, and your CSS all completely separate, and that's rapidly changing with the rise of frameworks. So we're starting to, front-end development is changing as a whole. We're looking at encapsulated components that include all three of these things, okay? So they include the template or the output, the styling, and the functionality or the JavaScript. And it may feel strange at first, but you'll come to see how convenient it is and how much easier it is to structure and debug your applications. So here we have a to-do application similar to what we'll be building, and each of these are separate components. Okay, so you have the application as a whole, and then you have, for instance, your to-dos component, which is this right here, or to-do list. Then you have each to-do, which is also a separate component. Then down here you have your add to-do component and you have your search component, and you have them all interact with each other through props. You could use a state management system like Vuex, which we'll talk about, but each component can hold its own data, hold its own methods, and you can also use what are called directives inside the template, which we're going to look at as well. All right, so the anatomy of a component, there's basically three parts, and this is what I mean about Vue being very common sense. You can see that there's the output, the functionality, and the style. So basically the HTML, the JavaScript, and the CSS, and this is all encapsulated in the component, okay? So for the output, we have our template tags, and then we have our markup. And you can see this right here, this user.name. This is using interpolation so that we can output dynamic content. In the script tag here, you'll see we're just exporting a default object with a name, so the component name, which is user, and then it has data, a data method, which returns basically the state for your component. In this case, we have a user with the name of Brad, and we're actually outputting that in the template here. And then we can have style that's associated with this component. If we use the scoped keyword, it means that this style is only going to pertain to this particular component. So everything is encapsulated, which makes it easier to manage and easier to debug. All right, so how do we get started? You could include Vue in a simple script using a CDN, but most professional Vue applications are going to use the Vue-CLI, the command line interface. Right now it's version 3, which is absolutely incredible. It includes all the necessary tooling you need. It includes Babel, which will compile newer JavaScript features to be browser compatible. You can use TypeScript with Vue if you want, ESLint for linting, PostCSS, and some other features as well. It includes a dev server with hot reload, and what I think is really awesome is the new Vue UI tool, which instead of running commands to start your server and do those types of tasks, you have a graphical interface. You can also use it to install plugins. You can manage multiple applications, and we're going to take a look at that in a little bit. All right, so the last thing I want to mention before we jump in is state. And each component can hold its own data and state, but there may be times when you're building a fairly large application and you need to share state across many components. So Vuex is used for state management. We're not going to be looking at Vuex in this crash course, but I will be doing a crash course dedicated to Vuex pretty soon. The app that we're building is small, so we can simply pass around the data rather than implementing a central store or state management system. All right, so that's it for the slides. Let's go ahead and jump in and learn Vue.js. All right, so we're going to need to install the Vue-CLI to get started, and we're going to use NPM for that. So in order to use NPM, which is the Node Package Manager, you need to have Node.js installed. So if you don't have that already, just go to nodejs.org and download either the long-term support or the latest version. All right. Another thing I would suggest is the Vue.js dev tools for Chrome, which allow you to basically view the structure of your components, the data that your components have, stuff like that. So I would suggest installing that as well. And then this is the Vue.js, basically their documentation, their homepage. So if you go to get started, you can see all the different, all the lingo over here, the template syntax, class and style bindings, everything you need to know as far as the fundamentals is in this documentation. And then cli.vuejs.org is the documentation for the CLI itself. All right, so if we go to get started and we click on installation, it shows us how to install it with either npm or yarn. So we need to install it globally, and it's going to be @vue/CLI. You're going to want to open your terminal or your Windows command prompt and just run npm or yarn. You can use yarn as well, and install -global, and it's going to be @vue/CLI. That will install the version 3 CLI, which I already have installed. And then you can run vue --version, and that will show you what version is installed. Now, once you have the Vue CLI, there's two ways to create an application, and I want to show you both ways. You have the command line way by using Vue create, and then you can also use Vue UI, which is the graphical user interface. And it's up to you on what you want to use. The command line way is easier, but using the graphical user interface, you get a whole bunch of analytics. You can basically start and stop your server from the interface and stuff like that. So let's first use Vue create. So I'm going to say Vue create, and I'm just going to call this application test. And it's going to ask me to pick a preset. I'm going to choose default Babel ESLint. And it's just going to go through the motions and create all the boilerplate files for a Vue application. And then it's going to tell us we can run npm run serve to start our server. And that's pretty much it. We can then go on to development. But again, I want to show you how to use the UI as well. So it should be done any second. Okay, so we created a directory called test. So if we cd into test, this is our Vue app. As you can see all the files here, and we can just run npm run serve. Okay, so that's going to start the development server on port 8080. So if we go to our browser here, go to localhost, port 8080, and there's our Vue app, okay? And we can get started on development. Now, like I said, I want to show you the other way to do it, which is using the user interface. So let's close this up and let's stop the server with Control-C. I'm going to cd ... back into my main directory here, and we're going to run Vue UI. And what this is going to do is it's going to start the graphical user interface on port 8000, and this is basically a project manager. So we have no existing projects, but if I go to create, we can choose a location. So I'll just go into documents, and actually I already had one there. Let's go back, and I'll just go to my desktop, I guess. So we'll say create new project, and I'm going to call this Vue _crash _to-do list. And you can choose your package manager, which default I believe is going to be npm, and then we'll click next. And then same question as we had in the terminal, default preset Babel and ESLint, create project, and now it's doing the same thing that it was doing in the terminal. All right, so once that's done getting set up, you're going to see your project dashboard, and we'll just click understood here, get that out of the way. And over here on the sidebar, you'll see some different options like plugins. So we have the Vue-CLI service, the Babel plugin, the ESLint plugin. Under dependencies, it shows us basically what's in our package.json file. So Vue is our main dependency. We have Babel, ESLint, all this stuff. Configuration, so you can configure your Vue-CLI, your output directory, stuff like that. So you can just do stuff, excuse me, within the browser as opposed to within files and within the command line. And then under tasks, we have serve and build. So we can serve our application, run our dev server. We can also build out our static assets. So let's click serve and then run task. And it's basically going to do the same exact thing as when we did npm run serve in the other application. But you also get all of these analytics, which is pretty damn cool, I think. Now, if you want to view your app, you can just go to Open App, and again, it opens on 8080. Okay, so it's the same thing. There's a couple more steps, but again, you get this whole nice little interface, which I'm not even completely familiar with. I haven't used everything in it, but I think it is pretty cool. So we're gonna keep this going, and let's go ahead and open up VS Code. Let's see. I'm gonna open up VS Code. And we're going to open up our project here. So I put it in the desktop, which is right here. Okay, so we'll open that up. And now we have all of our files. Now, whether we use the UI or the Vue create command, it's going to create the same files. Okay, same structure, boilerplate. So we're going to go through these files and just kind of show you what it includes, how things work. So the package.json, as you can see, as for regular dependencies, we just have the Vue framework, just like you saw in the UI, and then all the dev dependencies like Babel and ESLint and so on. And then for the scripts, we have the serve script, so npm run serve, which we ran from the UI, but you can also run from the command line. The build script, you also have lint for linting. And then if we look at public index.html, this is basically the page that's served in the browser. So Vue is a single page application framework. It's used to create single page applications, or SPAs. And basically it loads one file, which is this index.html file. And this div right here with the ID of app is basically a placeholder for our Vue application. And it works similar to how React works. And if you watched that crash course, I went over this as well for React. Now, the way that it's being output here is in our source folder, there's a main.js, which is basically the entry point to Vue. We're importing Vue, we're importing our main app component, which is a file called app.vue. And then down here, we're creating a new Vue instance, and we're rendering the app component inside of a div, or it doesn't have to be a div, but an element with the ID of app. which is what I just showed you in the index HTML. Okay, so it's loading the index HTML page, and then everything comes through this main.js and through this main app.vue file. So this app.vue file is a component. It's structured like any other component you would build. It has a template, it has a script for your JavaScript, and it has a style. Now this style is going to be global to your application. So if you have global styling, you can put that in here. And then the template is your markup, obviously, your output. And here you can see we're actually outputting an image. I'm gonna make this smaller now because I want, if I can grab onto it, I want to be able to see both the application and the code at the same time. So let's make this smaller. And we'll just let this run, but let's go to our app. We can close these other tabs up. So the logo is what you're seeing here, and then we have a hello world component. Okay, so components are embedded just like an HTML tag, and we're importing that hello world component right here, which is coming from components hello world.vue. All right, now to use an embedded component inside of your export right here, which is just an object, you have components, which is another object, and you have to define what components you're using. So in this case, hello world. Now you can also pass in props to your components. And if you're familiar with React, this should be a familiar concept. So we're passing in a message prop that says, welcome to your Vue JS app. And if we look at hello world.vue, that message is being output right here, which you can see right here. And then the rest of this is just hard-coded HTML that you're seeing here. Okay, so I could just delete all of this right here. And let's see. So you need to keep one element that is inside of your template, and it has to be one. I couldn't put another div right here like that. It'll give me an error. All right, and it doesn't have to be a div. It just has to be some kind of element. And let's just put an H1, and we'll just say hello world. And if I save, it's going to auto update, okay, or auto reload. And notice that this hello world component is structured just like the app component. The template, the script, which has an export default, name of the component, and also the props. Okay, whenever you pass in a prop, you want to define them here. And then down here we have our style. Now notice this scoped right here. What this means is that this styling is going to be limited to this particular component, which is really cool. It encapsulates everything, the style, the JavaScript, and the output. Okay, but I'm going to close this up and go back into app.vue, and let's get rid of the logo. We don't need that. Okay, if I save it, it just auto reloads. Now I probably should have mentioned this before, but you want to install some kind of Vue extension for your text editor, whether it's VS Code or Atom or Sublime Text. If you're seeing this Vue file, if it's all white or it's all one color, you're not seeing the syntax highlighting, you definitely want to install something. What I use is Vuetur, so this right here, VETUR, by Pine Wu, and it's Vue tooling for VS Code. So it has syntax highlighting, snippets, Emmet integration, debugging, auto completion. It's a really nice extension. But there's a lot of them. There's a lot of different Vue extensions. But if you're not seeing the syntax highlighting, definitely install one of them. So anyways, let's get back to our app.vue here, and I'm going to completely remove the hello world. I'll keep the file there, but I'm going to get rid of the import. And I'm going to get rid of where we embedded it in the app component up here. Also the main styling here, I'm going to get rid of that. And I'm just going to paste in something very simple, basically just a reset for the margin and padding, and then just the Arial font family. So we'll go ahead and save that. Now we have nothing displaying in the browser. So I want I will also get rid of this hello world here. I want to start to talk about data. Okay, so your component can have data. Now this is the main app component, so this is going to be a to-dos list, right? So we need to access the to-dos from multiple components. From the to-dos, from the to-do item, we're going to have for each item will be its own component. Also the form, the add to-do form, we need to be able to add to that state, add to those to-dos through the form. So this is where I'm actually going to store the to-dos data. And the way that we do that is, we'll keep this components here for now because we're going to need it, but we're going to say data, excuse me, I don't know what's wrong with my throat. But we're going to say data, and then data is actually a function that's going to return an object. And then in here is where we can put whatever we want, really. So if I say, for instance, MSG, and I set that to a string of hello, I can go up here and I can put in double curly braces, and I can say MSG and save, and we get hello. Okay, so we can store our data right here. I don't care about a message. That was just an example. What I am going to put here are some to-dos. Okay, so this to-dos is going to be an array of objects. And again, if you watched my React crash course, you're going to see a lot of similarities because it's the same exact application except using Vue instead of React. And I wanted to do that so that you can make a quality comparison of the two frameworks. So you can see the same exact thing done in both frameworks. I'll also be coming out with an Angular one soon as well. So I'm going to just paste in some to-dos here. 1 second, let me grab them. So we have an array with 3 to-do objects that have an ID, a title, and a completed value. So completed is a Boolean value. Now, what I need to do is create a separate component to display the to-dos. So let's go ahead and do that. In components, let's say new file, capital T, to-dos.vue. Okay, you want to use a .vue extension. And just like with the app component, we want to do template. And let's go down here, we'll do script. And with the Vueter extension, when you do script, it'll automatically put the export default for you as well. And then if we wanted any style, we could do style, and we could add scoped, which will make it, it'll make it, just for this component. So in our template here, for right now, let's just put a div because we need just a root element, and we'll put an h1 and we'll just say to-dos. Okay, and then for the export default, we just need a name. So this is the component name, which I'll call to-dos. And that's pretty much it. That's all we need in order to be able to import it into the app component and display it. So we'll save this. We'll go back to app, and we'll go right here above the export, and we'll import to-dos from, and we want to go in components / to-dos, and then we just want to add that to the components here. And then if we go up here, we can embed it just like that, and we'll save. Okay, and there it is. There's our to-dos component. Now, this is probably a good time to open up the dev tools. So if we open up our Chrome dev tools, and if you installed the Vue extension, you'll have a Vue tab. And from here, you can see your root app, the app component, and then the to-dos component. So it shows you the structure of your components. And if I click on app down here, it will show you any data that's associated with that component, which we have our array here. So the goal now is to get these to-dos into the to-dos component. So the way that we do that is by basically passing it in with a directive called vbind. Okay, Vue has a bunch of different template directives, and we're going to look at quite a few of them. But vbind, we can say we want to bind the to-dos, so we're going to call this to-dos, and we're going to pass in to-dos from the data. Okay, so this pertains to this down here. And then that's being passed in as a prop. So let's save this, and let's go to to-dos.vue, and we want to go down into our export. Let's put a comma here, and let's say props, and open some brackets, and we'll say to-dos. Okay, so we're accepting these as props, and then we should have access to them in the template. Now, this is an array, right? It's not like a single value we just want to output. It's an array, so we want to loop through them. And the way that we do that is with another directive called v4. So I'm going to go, let's get rid of this h1 here, and let's create a div, And let's add the v4 directive, and we're going to say v4 to do in to-dos. Okay, so you could call this whatever you want, but this to-dos pertains to the props that are passed in. And then in here, for now, I'm just going to put an h3. Ultimately, I want this to be a whole new component, but for now, I'll put an h3 and just show you we have access to do dot and then whatever property, so title. And if I save that, it works. It loops through and it shows each to do. I'm just going to make this smaller for now. So it loops through, shows each one in an H3, but notice we have an ESLint error here. The reason for that is because when you loop through like this, you need a unique key attached to it, much like with React, if you have any experience with React lists. So to do that, we just need to use vbind. We actually want to do vbind key. And this should be a unique value, and your ID should be unique, so we'll just simply use to do ID. And now that error is gone. All right, so we're looping through our to-dos props. Now we want to create a whole new component. So I'm going to go to components, new file, and we'll say to-do item.view. All right, we'll set this up with our template, and let's put a div. For now, just put let's put a paragraph. Actually, you know what? We don't need. Yeah, we need a div and then a paragraph. That's good. And I'll just say I'll hard code in or hard write in whatever to do item. And then down here in our script, we're going to put the name of the component, which is to do item. And let's go down here and add in our style, and we want to scope it to, or scoped it should be. And then I'm just going to paste in a little bit of styling. You guys can just copy this. Very simple styling just for the to-do items here. So let's just tab that over. All right, so that's the styling for this component. Now I'm going to save this, and then we'll go back to to-dos.view, and instead of this H3, we want to basically output the to-do item. But to do that, we have to first import it. Okay, so we'll say import to-do item from, and it's in the same folder, so we'll just say /to-do item.view. And then we need to add it as a component, so right here we'll say components to do item. Make sure we put a comma here, and then up here I'm gonna get rid of that H3 and I'm gonna embed to do item like that. And if I save it, we're just gonna see to do item 3 times. The reason for that is it's hard coded in here. Obviously that's not what we want to show. We want to show the actual data. So the way that we do that is, again, pass in a prop or bind a prop to the to-do item. So we're going to say v-bind to do equals to do, okay, which is the this right here. Okay, so for each iteration, we have access to the individual to do, and we're passing it into the to-do item. So we'll save that. We're still not going to see a difference because we haven't changed anything in to-do item. Now we're accepting a prop, so we're going to go right here and we're going to say props. And let's say we're accepting a to-do. And then in the paragraph, let's get rid of that, and let's put in to-do.title and save. And now it's showing each to-do item. Okay, so let's see. I want this styling. So we have a class of to-do item. I'm just going to put that right on the div here. So class equals to-do item and save, and there we go. All right, so next thing I want to do is I want to implement the is complete. So you can see we have a class here called is complete, and we have text decoration set to line through. Now I only want the line through if it's completed, and if we look at our data, we have the the middle one here is completed. So in to do item, I'm going to go on to the this div right here where we added class to do item, and we're going to basically we're going to add kind of a conditional. We're going to bind the class on a condition of if it's completed, then we want to add the isComplete class. So we're going to do v-bind, and we're going to do class. Okay, so we're binding a class, and we're going to set this equal to, and then we want to just open up some curly braces. We want to put the class name, so it's going to be is-complete, and then put a colon and then the condition. So the condition is going to be to do dot complete, or completed, sorry. All right, let me just close this up. So if I go ahead and save that, notice that the middle one is now crossed out. So just to kind of reiterate what's going on here, we're binding a class on the condition of this being true. Okay, so if this is true, this isComplete is going to be added to the class, and even though we already defined basically a static class here, we can still do vbind class here. And if I were to go to the data, and let's take the first one and say that that's completed, it's true, and save, you'll see that gets the line through it. Okay, now obviously we want a way to make it incomplete or whatever, or toggle the complete. So we're going to add an event for this. Okay, this is the first time we're going to look at an event. Now I want a checkbox, so right before the title, still within the paragraph, I'm going to put an input with the type of checkbox. Checkbox, and we don't need a name or ID. What we do need to add is an event. So I'm actually going to do a v-on directive. So I'm going to say v-on change. I'm going to set that to a method called mark complete. All right, so input type checkbox v-on, so we're using the v-on directive, which is used to add events. We want to change event because this is a checkbox. We could do v-on click, v-on submit, and we'll do some of those later. But we're looking at a change event and then calling mark complete. All right, so I'm going to save that. Now if I do that, we're going to get an error in the console, as you can see, because we don't have right here, property or method mark complete is not defined. Now the way that we define methods is inside of our script, our export right here, we're going to go under the props and say methods, which is an object of methods. So we're going to add one called mark complete. And just to make sure it works, let's do a console log. We'll just do 1, 2, 3. So I'll save that. And now if I check one, you see down here 1, 2, 3. So that event, that change event, is firing off mark complete. Now, when that's fired off, I want to change whatever the current to do. I want to change the completed value to whatever it's not. If it's false, I want it to change to true. If it's true, I want it to change to false. So I'm going to go in here and say this dot to do, because I can access it like just with the this keyword, and I can say dot completed. I want to access the completed property. I want to set it equal to whatever the completed is not. So not this dot to do dot completed. All right, so if we save that and we go over here and we check off this, you'll see that it gets a line through it. Okay, because we're toggling that value. In fact, if we look at our view tools and we look at the state right here, the data, let's look at the first one, completed true. If I check it, you'll go see it goes to false, so it keeps switching. Okay, so now that we can mark these as complete, I want to now be able to delete them. So I'm going to add a button. Let's go right under the title, still within the paragraph, and let's add a button. And for the content, it's just going to be an X, and then I'm going to add a class of del, because I put a class down below to just kind of style this a little bit. So it gives it a red, round red button with an X in the middle. So in order to do this, we have to basically traverse up to where the data is, where the array is, right? Because we're deleting, so we need to basically just look at this and say, which one do we want to delete, which ID, and then get rid of it. So the way that we can go upwards, because we're in the to-do item, we need to go up to to-dos and then up into app.vue. So we can do that by emitting an event, and we're going to put a click handler on this. So let's say @click. Okay, we can use vbind or von. We can use @click as well, and then we want to set this to $emit. Okay, so this is going to emit in an event. We need to give it a name. I'm going to call it del-to-do. That's kind of the convention, is to use a hyphen. And then we can also send parameters. So if I put a comma, I can send the to-do.id, because we need to know which one we're actually deleting. So let's save that. Now if I click it, nothing's going to happen in the app, but look down here in the Vue tools. You'll see that an event was fired off called del-to-do. It's a type of emit, and if we look at the payload, it shows you the ID. If I click this one here, the payload is 2, here it's 3, so it's sending that ID as a payload. Now the way that we catch this is we can go into to-dos, where we embedded the to-do item, and we want to just add here, let's see, we want to add a v-on, because we're basically catching this event that's being fired off. It's called del-to-do, so we want to say on del-to-do. Then we want to actually, what we want to do is emit again, because we need to go up to app.vue. Right now we're in to-dos, so we're going to say emit, and again I'm just going to say del-to-do, and we want to send the to-do.id. Okay, so now if I click this, actually hold on, let me reload this. Okay, so you'll see that the del-to-dos are getting emitted from to-dos and to-do item. Now we want to catch this in app.vue. So up here we're going to do the same thing, v-on del-to-do. Then we're going to call a function, or I should say a method, called delete-to-do. All right. Now remember, the way that we handle methods is down here in the export. So I'm going to go under the data, which ends right here. So we'll put a comma and we'll say methods, which is an object, and then we'll say delete to do, and that's going to take in the ID because we passed that in as a parameter, or as a payload. So to delete it, I mean, there's quite a few ways that we could do this. I'm going to use filter, which is a high order array method. So I'm going to say this dot to dos, because remember, we can just set this dot to dos to whatever. I'm going to take the current to dos and I'm going to filter. And what filter does is it loops through like a for each does, but you can have a condition and it'll return an array based on that condition. And our condition is we don't want, basically we want everything except the one with that ID, because we want to delete that one. So to do, that's basically just every iteration we're going to call it to do. We're going to use an arrow function and then add our condition, which is where to do.id is not equal to the ID that's passed in here. So we're just filtering it out. Okay, whatever one we click, if it's ID 2, that's going to get filtered out and it's going to get removed. So let's save this and let's try it out. Let's go up here, we'll delete 2 and it goes away. All right, if we delete 3, it goes away, and obviously it's going to come back if I reload, because we're not persisting to a database or anything. Vue is a front-end application. I'm sorry, a front-end framework. However, I am going to show you how we can make requests to APIs. We're actually going to use JSON placeholder, which is like a fake REST API that we can make requests to. But we're going to get to that a little later. So what I want to do now is just add the header, which is kind of just a markup. There's no functionality really to it. So we're going to add in components. I'm actually going to create a new folder called layout. And inside here, I'll create a file called header.vue. And we'll put it in our template. And for the template, let's actually use a header, HTML5 header tag here, and we'll give it a class of header. And let's put an H1, and we'll just say to-do list. Okay, later on I'm going to show you how to implement the Vue router, and we'll put some routes in here. We're going to have just the home page and then an about page, but we're going to get to that later. So for the script, let's just say name header, and I'm going to add a little bit of styling. So we want this style to be scoped, and I'm going to paste this in. It's really simple. So basically just gives it a dark background, gives it some padding and stuff. All right, so we'll save that. Now we'll go back to app.vue and let's import the header. Oops. Import header from, and it's ./components/layout/header. And then we're just going to add it as a component. So we'll put in header right here, and then we'll just embed it right here. Okay, so we'll save that, and there we go. There's our header. Now, next thing we're going to do is work on the form, the add to do form. So let's create that. In components, we'll create a file called add to do.vue. And again, we'll put our template, and inside here let's put a div, and we're going to have a form. Don't need an action. Inside the form we'll have an input, the type of text. We don't need, let's see, actually, for the name we'll do, this is going to be the title of the to-do. We don't need an ID. I will put a placeholder. And for the placeholder, we'll just say add to do. Okay, then we want an input with the type of submit, and the value, just say submit. And I'm going to give this a class of btn. Okay, and then let's see, script, we want the name, add to do. And then for style, I'm just going to grab this real quick. Basically, I'm just using Flexbox here to kind of align everything. Okay, so we'll save that. Now we're gonna do some more stuff here, but let's just bring it in. So we'll go to app.vue. Let's import it. So we'll just copy this down and say add to do. And then we need to add it down here as well. And up here, we're going to embed it right between the header and the to-dos. All right, so we'll save that, and there we go. Now, the button here doesn't look very good. It has a class of btn, and I'm actually going to make that global. So I'm going to put that right in the app.vue styling down here with the rest of our global styling. So let me just grab that real quick. And just fix that. So we'll save, and there we go. So that looks pretty good. So now we want to add functionality to our add to do. I'm just going to close this up. And to do that, any field that we have, we only have one input, which is title, but if we had more, we would have to add them to our data, our component data. So I'm going to put a comma here and say data, which is a method that's going to return an object, and I'm going to put in title. Now, if we had name, email, city, stuff like that, we would put all of that in here. And then for the input itself, we need to add on a vModel directive and set that to title. Okay, so it works like Angular, actually. That's what this reminds me of, is in Angular you have your ng model. In Vue we have vModels. So to me, Vue is a little bit like React and Angular mixed. I know a lot of people don't agree with that, but that's kind of what it seems like to me. But let's go ahead and save that. And we're not going to see any difference yet because we have no event, right? When we submit this, if we type something in here and we submit, nothing is going to happen. So on the form, I'm actually going to just say add @submit, and I'm going to set this to a method called add to do. Now, just like with the delete, we have to basically traverse upwards to where the array is, which is in app.vue. The reason I didn't do the emit right here is because I want to first construct the to-do and then send it and then emit that in the event. So we're actually going to create a method down here under the data. We'll put a comma and we'll say methods, and let's say add to do. So basically we want to construct an object, so I'm going to say const new to do equals an object, and let's do an ID. Now the ID needs to be unique, so what I'm going to do is open up my terminal real quick, and I'm going to install something called UUID, and I did this in the React Crash Course as well. It's just a small package that allows us to generate IDs on the fly. So let's do npm install UUID. And once we deal with JSON placeholder, we won't really need this, because when you make a request to JSON placeholder, you don't need to send an ID. It creates one for you, just like MongoDB would, or most databases. So let's bring in UUID. So we'll import UUID. And the way that we can generate an ID is by saying UUID dot, and then there's different versions. We're going to use version 4, so we just want to say version 4 and then some parentheses. All right, and then the title is going to be this dot title. We can access it because we have title here. We bound it to this input here, so we have access to it with this dot title. And then completed is always going to be false when we first add it to do. Okay, so now that we've constructed our object, we need to send up to parent by emitting an event. So this dot money sign emit dot, not dot, parentheses, and then I'm going to call this add dash to do, and I'm going to pass in as a parameter the entire new to do. Okay, so if I save this, and if I go here and I just put something in and submit, you'll see that it gets emitted in our Vue tools down here. So we need to go back up to app.vue, where we have our add component, which is right here, and we basically need to catch that emit. So we do that with v-on, and we'll say v-on add to do. We want to call add to do. So we'll go back down here to where our methods are, and we'll put a comma right here, and we'll say add to do. That's going to take in a new to do object, and this is going to be pretty easy. We'll just take to dos and we'll set it to, we're going to use brackets here. Basically we're going to use the spread operator to copy what's already in to-dos, and then we're just going to add on new to-do. Okay, and that should do it. And there's different ways you can do this. This probably looks really familiar if you watch the React one as well. Same thing with the filtering. We're basically adding and removing them the same way. All right, so let's test this out. I'm just going to say test and submit. Okay, so one thing I forgot is back in the form in the add to do, in the method right here, we want to pass in an event parameter, and then we want to call e.prevent default, because we don't want the form to actually try to submit to a file. So that should stop the default behavior and then create the new to-do and then emit the event and call the function. So let's try it. Submit, and there it is. All right. Oh, one thing I forgot is, see how it's still here? I want that to clear, so we can simply say this dot title equals nothing. So that way, once we submit something, the form clears. Okay, so there's two things left, two major things left that I want to show you. One is making HTTP requests to a backend, to an API, handling responses, stuff like that, and then also the Vue router. So I think we're going to deal with the HTTP requests first. Now we're going to use something called JSON placeholder. Just go back here to the home page. And I've used this in many videos and courses. It provides us with a fake REST API for testing and prototyping. So it works as a real backend that we can make GET requests to, POST requests, put, patch, delete. And there's multiple resources we can use, like posts, comments, albums. We're using to-dos. So as you can see here, we don't need the user ID. We can ignore that. But we have an ID, title, and completed. So this is what we want to do, is load the to-dos from here. Also, when we make our add and delete functions, we want to make requests to this API and get a response and then handle it in the UI. So let's head back to VS Code. I'm just going to minimize that. Actually, you know what? Let me go back there for a second. Let's grab the URL. So if I go to to-dos, we're going to want this URL right here. So I'm going to copy that. Now, to make our initial request, we're going to use a special method. We're going to go to app.view, and we're going to use a special method called created, which works similar to how component did mount works in React. It basically fires off when the component loads. All right, but first I want to just clear out these to-dos. We're just going to have an empty array to begin with. Okay, so we have an empty array now. If I save this, these will all go away. And then underneath methods, which ends right here, I'm going to put a comma and I'm going to say created. Okay, so this will run right away, and this is where we want to make our request. So you could use the fetch API if you want. I prefer Axios, so I'm going to go ahead and run npm install Axios, which is just an HTTP library, so we can make GET requests, POST requests, and so on. And again, you can use the fetch API if you want. So let's bring it in. We have to bring it in if we want to use it. So import Axios from Axios, and then in created, we're going to make our request. So axios.get, since we're making a GET request, and I'm going to paste in that URL that I copied. I'm going to close this up again. So paste that in. Now this is going to return a promise. So the way that we handle promises is with .then. Okay, we can also do .catch, and if we get an error, we'll just console log the error. All right. Now this is going to give us a response back, and this response is going to have a value called data. So res.data is going to give us our actual to-dos. And what we want to do here is set, we're going to put an arrow function, and we're going to say this.todos. We want to set that to res.data. Okay, so this .todos pertains to this right here. We're basically filling this with the to-dos we get back from this request when the page loads. So let's save. And there we go. Now, initially, it gives us, I think, 100 or 200 of these things, and that's too many. So JSON placeholder allows us to limit that with a parameter. So I can say question mark, put in a query parameter of limit equals, let's do 10. And save, and now we only get 10. Actually, you know what, let's do 5. Okay, so we get 5 to-dos from that API. All right, and normally this would probably be something you built, maybe a Node and Express server, or I don't know, Python, Flask, or Django, or PHP, whatever it may be, some kind of back-end API that you build. All right, now with the add and delete, we also want to make requests. So let's go in the add to do, and let's say Axios. Actually, there's a couple things we need to address here. One is that JSON placeholder gives you an ID. Okay, when you make a post request and you create a resource, it gives you the ID. So inside of our add to do, we no longer need this right here. So we can actually get rid of that, and we no longer need to bring in UUID. I'll just comment that out. So now our new to do consists of a title and completed, no ID. So let's save that. Let's go back to our app.view, and remember, this now has just the title and the completed. So what I'm going to do is use some destructuring to pull out title and completed from the new to-do object. And then we need to make a post request. So let's say axios.post, and the URL is going to be this right here, not the limit, but just the /todos, and then it's going to be, yeah, that's right. And then we need to add another parameter with the data that we're sending, which is going to be the title. So basically title, but since this is the same, we can use ES6 and just do title. And then also completed, okay, which we pulled from this new to do. So we're sending that data along, and then that's going to give us a promise back. So we want to say .then, .catch if there's an error. Okay, and then again, this will give us a response. We want to put an arrow function here, and the way that we're going to handle it is the same way that we did before. We're just going to copy this. We don't need the semicolon, so let's just cut that, get rid of that, and put this right in here. Okay, now instead of new to do, we're going to take the data that it gives us back, so res.data. Because when you make a post request to this with a new to do, it gives you back that to do along with the ID that it creates for you. So let's save that, and now we should still be able to add. And what will happen if I just put test in here and submit, what happens is it makes a request to JSON placeholder, it adds it, then it gives us a response, and then it gets added to the UI. Okay, so that way it gets added to the server and the UI. Now, JSON placeholder doesn't give us a database that persists. Obviously, they're not going to do that because people would just flood it. But it does mimic a real backend API. The only difference is it doesn't stick. If I reload, it still goes away. All right, so hopefully that makes sense. Now, for the delete to do, we're going to do something similar. We're going to use Axios. We're going to make a delete request, and it's going to be to this URL. But when you make a delete request, you actually need to add the ID on the end. So I'm going to use backticks here so that I can put a variable in here by doing /$, curly braces, and we want the ID, which is coming in right here. Okay, so we're going to delete, and then that gives us a promise. And let's say res, and then we just want to do exactly what we did right here, except we want to do it after we make the request. So just stick that right there. All right, so we'll save it, and we should still be able to delete. Okay, it makes a delete request to the server. We get a response back, and then we delete it from the UI. All right, guys, so that's how we can handle HTTP requests. Next thing I want to go over, or I want to show you, is the Vue router. Now, we can actually install the router. I mean, you could install it with NPM or Yarn, but we can install it with our UI here, our graphical interface, or control panel, whatever you want to call it. So if we go to, let's see, where is it? Shows you how much I use. Oh, right here, plugins. So we can add Vuex and we can add Vue router. Now, there's a little hiccup here. When we add Vue router, it's going to actually overwrite the app.vue file. So, I mean, usually what I would do if I planned on using Vue router, I would install it first and then work from there. But I didn't want to do that because I didn't want to start off with the router. So, like I said, it's gonna overwrite this app.vue. So I'm gonna copy everything that's in here. I'm gonna select all and copy, and I'm just gonna open up a new file and paste that in, and just keep it there for now. Okay, and then we're gonna go and we're gonna add Vue router. Okay, so official library, blah blah blah, and click continue, and it's just going to install it as a dependency. Okay, so Vue router is now installed. If we go and we look at our application, it's ruined, basically. It replaced the entire app.vue. So if we go to app.vue now, it looks like this. It also creates an about page for us, and we can flip back and forth. And if we look at the file structure, what happened is it created a folder called views. Okay, and there's a file called home.vue, which is our home component that's showing here, and it's showing the hello world from before. All right, and then there's an about.vue file, which is just a template, and it also gave us this router.js, and this is where we create our routes. Okay, so in our routes, we create an object that has a path, a name, and then a component, and in this case it's displaying the home component here, and then we also have a path with /about that displays the about component. Now what I want to do is replace the home component with what we had in the app.vue. So let's go to let's see, the file that we pasted the code in here that we had before, and copy it and go to home.vue in the views file, and paste that in, and let's save. All right, so we get failed to compile because right here, name, we still have apps, so we want to change that to home and save. And that's not the only reason. Can't resolve, add to do. Okay, so the paths are a little different because now we're in the views folder, so we need to go out of the views folder, so we need to do .. / for these and save, and now we have it back. Okay, and everything should still work just the same. Now up here we have a little menu because in our app.vue right here it's embedding the router, or whatever the current view is, it embeds here, and then we also have this little navigation. What I want to do though is have the header here, because I want the header on every page. If we go to the about page, our header isn't there because it's in the home component. So what I'll do is go into home.vue, and let's remove all the signs of the header here, so that, this, and this. So now if I save that, our header's gone, and now we want to bring it into app.vue. So we'll go right here, put in our script, we'll say name app components header, and we have to bring that in. Header. And we're going to bring that in from, let's see, dot slash component slash layout slash header. And then I'm going to put that in. Let's actually get rid of this because I want the routes inside of the header. So I'm going to just get rid of that completely and put in our header up here. Okay. So we'll save that. And now we have our header back. Now I still want to have a link to the about page. So I want to put that in the header. So let's we can get rid of this file now. Let's go to header.view and let's add in the navigation. So right under the H1 here, actually I should have just copied it from app.view. Let me see if I can undo. Yeah, I'm just going to copy this div with the ID of nav and the routes, put back header, and then put that inside header.view right under the H1. Okay, and the way that we link to pages is not with an href. We use router link and the to attribute. Similar to React router DOM, we have the link to. With Vue, we have router link to. So I think that's it. Let's go ahead and save that. And there we go. I don't like the underlines and stuff, so let's add text, decoration none. There we go. And if I click about, brings us to the about page. I'm just going to change that up a little bit, the content. So I'm going to go to views about.view, and let's just say about, put a paragraph. This is the to-do list app version 1.0.0. It is part of the Vue Crash Course on YouTube. And save. Alright, so that's pretty much it. That's how we can implement the router. And I know it's a little confusing. You'd probably want to install the router first and then deal with your views. Basically, our home view, it's just our add to do and our to-dos component. Okay. Instead of just having a view equal one component, we have two components, but of course we could add more if we wanted to. So let's close this stuff up. And when it's time to actually build out your static assets so that you can deploy your application, you can do that from the command line. You can do npm run build, or you can do it from your UI. So if we go to the dashboard here, and we go to tasks, let's go down to build. And by the way, if you want to change your configuration, so if you go to the Vue-CLI right here, you can change the output directory. By default, it's going to be called dist, but you can change that if you want. I'm just going to leave it. And then if we go to build and we say run task, what's going to happen is it's going to build out that dist folder. And those are the files that we would actually deploy to our production server. So let's go back to VS Code, and now notice we have a dist folder. Has the index.html, the static JavaScript. So this are the static assets. So this is basically our application that we would deploy. Now I'm not going to do the deployment in this video because I just want to focus on Vue itself, but a fantastic service to deploy to is Netlify. I'll actually put a link in the description to a video that shows you how to deploy something to Netlify. It's extremely easy. All you have to do is create a Git repository, sign up for Netlify, and just push it to Netlify, and it'll be live. Very, very simple. But that's going to be it, guys. Thank you so much for watching, especially if you made it to the end. If you like this course, please leave a like, and I'll see you next time.